We have a couple of presentations this evening. We'll begin with Dr. Wise doing the DEI update.
Well, thank you, President Johnson, Vice President Ranglin, members of the board. It's my privilege tonight to update you on our work that's happened this year with diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you remember back to June of last year, the board passed a resolution in regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making this a more supportive and nurturing place for our students on behalf of the community. Let me start with thanking all of our folks that have engaged with us so significantly. We've had 4 groups that have actively been working in this area over the past year, 3 of which did not exist prior to the board resolution. And we again want to just take this time to thank them for embracing the work and engaging in the work. It is difficult work, but it's also rewarding as we go through that. So let me kind of kick off with a couple of things that I hope you walk away from before I really get into the slides. First of all, throughout our conversations, it's very clear that diversity makes us better and it enriches the district. And so that's one of those things that I want to highlight right off the bat. And the other thing that we've talked about that's kind of an overarching theme for all of this work is our work has really become focused on the what and how of creating a more accepting culture that nurtures a sense of belonging for our students while demanding high expectations for all. And so that you'll see that go through. You're on the right slide, Meredith, we're good. And so let's start with a few assumptions and core beliefs that we've come together with as the groups have done their work. After this, I'll go through a little bit of each of the groups' work after some definitions. But the first one is where I already highlighted. It's that idea that diversity enriches our work. Second assumption or core belief is that there is historical bias and discrimination that we need to work to counteract. Our third bullet is we want to make sure that folks understand there's a variety of discrimination and inequities that have happened over time, not just the traditional ones we think of with race and color. It comes in multiple ways and multiple forms, some subtle, some not so subtle from a historical standpoint. But the end result is they exist and they're unacceptable. From a district-wide perspective, this is not an administration or a board initiative. We actually hold all staff accountable to build this culture and develop it and hold them responsible to act accordingly to make this happen on behalf of our students and the community we serve. The last point I'll ask you to remember as we move through this over time, we want this to be aspirational in our goals. Even if we never achieve our goals, we think that it's important that we make our goals aspirational and bold and that we strive to make a difference. We don't want to just tinker with the system. We want to make sure that we make a substantial difference. So with that said, our groups, as we started, Meredith, next slide, started to look at definitions. Ohio State, and you will talk about them in a later slide, actually has a 3-page glossary that they do with their work. And so we took a look at their definitions. We took a look at our definitions at several other districts and tried to put some working definitions so that folks understood what we're talking about, because diversity, equity, and inclusion are not the same thing. In this area of diversity, it's the representation. It goes back to those inequities I described on the first assumption slide. And it's varied from that perspective. Equity is really about fair treatment. This is that concept about what is equity versus what is equal. And sometimes equal isn't always fair. And so the example most commonly given is if we're all standing behind a fence and I'm 6'1" and somebody else is 4'7" and they can't see over the fence. The idea is we provide the box or whatever they need to stand on it so that they can see over the fence as well. That's an equitable solution, not an equal solution. And so we talk about that from that perspective. In this third definition, I really want to highlight the term belonging, or a sense of belonging. We want folks to feel like they belong, that they're loved, that they're nurtured and supported when they're with us, and well, at all times, but especially when they're with us. And that we want to actively invite their contributions, not just a passive, you're welcome here, but it's deeper than that. And so that inclusion piece is the other one that we want to highlight in the definitions from the perspective of we don't see these as the same. They are interrelated, but they are distinct as well. So that's the working definitions. From I mentioned the 4 groups. The first is the Inclusion Institute. We had staff members participate in an Inclusion Institute hosted by the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio, where they used outside facilitators to bring in. These are the 4 themes in the 4 areas that our group studied while they were with them and were facilitated. They looked at it from a variety of perspectives, but it was to develop the skill sets of those individuals who were involved and also broaden their knowledge base, as well as provide some frameworks that they could come back and work with our own people on. And so that's really the exploration. They have completed all 4 of those themes at this point and completed the Equity Institute. Brian Bowser's with us tonight if there's specific questions that I can't answer in regard to the Equity Institute. But this group now will disband as a group, and we will use the talents and expertise that they've gained and redistribute their membership through other committees on the district so that we can actually broaden our perspectives and our understandings as we try to continue to further that work. So the first group is the Inclusion Institute. Here's their 4 themes. Again, we had staff members participate. They thought the themes were very powerful, especially the first theme. And so we're looking forward to having their work brought back and included with the rest of our work. The second group is the Ohio State University Task Force. This is done with the Kirwan Institute. The Ohio State work is really focused much more on what we do with the adults in our organization than students. They are a resource creator and developer. They have several trainings, whether it be on implicit bias or institutional bias. We actually have 5 different modules that our trainers have been sent or have been trained on. We have 18 staff members now who have been trained to deliver that training back to our employee base. And so you'll see that come up. This is the Ohio State Task Force. There are several districts throughout Central Ohio. I believe there are 14 districts throughout Central Ohio that have engaged in this work with Ohio State University as well. And so we're excited about having some folks who have been trained and can deliver those modules to other groups throughout the district and other groups throughout the community. And so we will probably, well, I know more than probably, we will use these folks and the training that we've gained here. And we'll start that in the fall with our entire administrative team. We'll be using the panorama data from a later slide to target which specific area of their training we'll use in the modules, but we see this as an ongoing multi-year rollout where we will continue to train and become more aware in order to make a difference. So that's the Ohio State Task Force. The Celsa Group, technically this one was in existence prior to the board resolution. It's a result of the social emotional learning standards that were created by the state of Ohio, as well as our collective bargaining agreement to look at the social emotional standards for implementation. If you remember back to our collective bargaining agreement, there is a specific report that's due from the Celsa Group to both myself and the union president. And so when they've committed or completed that work, we will then transition this Celsa Group to become more focused on students and what we do with students. Perhaps the most important part of the Celsa work that I can share with you at this point is a panorama survey. It's done with students, and then there's a separate survey that's done with staff in order to gauge and create a baseline for where we are from their perspectives in regard to diversity, equity, inclusion, more specifically cultural competence, and that sense of belonging. Those are things that are highlighted very clearly in the panorama survey, and we'll get data on. We believe that survey, which actually wraps up this week, this month for all of our buildings, will then guide our work with which we do first and what are the biggest priorities as we move forward with students and staff to provide the training and to help create additional understandings to make a difference in the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion, and to create that better sense of belonging. So really, I want you to think of this group as it will evolve into more of a focus, along with the district staff development committee that was already in existence, to focus more on the training and what we do with students, what's done throughout building, professional development, and student programs. So that's the Celsa group. The fourth group is the district-wide work group. Mr. Ragland represents the board on that group. There are 13 individuals. It's a cross-section. There are students, parents, community members, teachers, classified staff, as well as 2 administrators, and one of which is myself on that committee. We've spent significant time. In fact, we met probably close to every month since the start of the school. Done a deep dive within our data sets, looked for discrepancies, looked at some of the district policies, tried to evaluate areas of concern, as well as opportunities to make the biggest difference. We've looked at mobility rates, we've looked at student discipline, we've looked at academic achievement, we've looked at College Credit Plus, we've looked at AP courses, we've looked at some of the mentoring programs. We've had reports from some of our third-party vendors, such as I Know I Can. In addition, we've met with and listened to counselors in their perspective as well. So we've tried to do that. Based on where we're at this point, we believe this group will transition to more of a oversight and monitoring group to monitor and make sure that there's accountability for the work moving forward, that this group will meet 3-4 times a year type of thing, 2-3 times a year, whatever that takes, in order to make sure there are goals, that we're implementing what we say we will implement, and that we're following through and making a difference. And if we need to adjust course, this would be the group that recommends that adjustment in the direction for the district. So that's kind of how we got to this point. And so now let's talk about really where we are at this point. There were really 4 themes that emerged. And as we talked to districts throughout the state and other states that have been engaged in this work, these are the themes that came forward. This goes back to this idea of focusing on the what and the how, and by creating a accepting culture that with a sense of belonging. The first bullet is really about high expectations for all, and making sure that we are aware of and understand what's in our courses of study, and that we represent our students well within what we teach to them. A great example here is our work with Columbia University, the Teachers College, where they've taken a look at what's exactly in all the reading rooms for students. When you look at literature that's often included, if it's included in school libraries, many times it doesn't represent Black authors very well. Or the main character in many of the selections were individuals that had been oppressed. And so trying to find diverse reading materials, diverse materials in general, written from a wide variety of perspectives, is really what this one's about. The second bullet gets to this point of there's not one path for all. We need to make sure there's multiple paths to achieve the outcome, and have students and parents have ownership and buy-in over the path they choose. The third bullet is a little bit more the culturally relevant and responsive curricula, as we take a look at, especially within the social sciences, what we provide and how we teach, making sure there's multiple perspectives that are shared and things don't come from just one point of view. And then the last piece is as well, policies and structures, practices that perpetuate inequity. And this isn't one, for me, this is one where, and when you look historically, it's easy to determine those policies like the redlinings or the Jim Crow laws or those things. It's much harder to see these things when you're in context and when you see them applied, because you just don't recognize them. It's kind of like the fish in water. The fish doesn't know he's in water because he doesn't know anything else. And so sometimes we have to ask these questions, or as one of our community members very clearly said, is we need to continue to look at everything that we do in an ongoing basis and look at it from that lens, and specifically ask the question, does this meet the criteria? Is this a policy that is perpetuates inequity in some way. And so it's as much not about finding those areas, even though we are looking for those. This is about making sure as we develop and implement policy and practice that it is not, or that it's equitable and that it's fair and it represents our population as well. The other piece then, the last slide that I have for you tonight, is really about these actionable themes. I've talked already about Panorama tonight, and that will guide our work moving forward. This targeted and consistent support systems beginning in early age. The board's done a phenomenal job of investing in that through through our, I just lost the term. Community and schools, individuals, as well as social workers and our other components. That's the type of thing we're looking at here. But the real question becomes, are we doing it in a systemic way, and can parents count on and understand where their contacts are at over a long period of time? It's about those connections. And once I know the organization and know who to go to, are they there for long periods? So whether it be a boys club, a girls club, how do we create a vertical articulation as students move through the system in order to support and nurture families? And again, you've invested heavily in community and schools, social workers, counselors, and those types of things. But do we need to look at that differently? Is there a way to put an advocacy program in place? That's really where this is headed. We don't have it defined at this point, but we believe we will over the next 14 months and have a better sense of a strategic way to go about this. Staff training. Those are the areas for cultural competence, implicit and institutional bias, where we think we'll start, but we're still waiting on the Panorama data. And again, I believe we'll train all administrators in the fall, and you'll see buildings start to engage in this work in the spring. To a specific point here, and to make this even more concrete, each building will be asked to include into their continuous improvement plan a goal to promote inclusion and or equity, a specific outline goal that's in part of their continuous improvement plan. And so let me go through, first of all, diversity is not listed. Our human resources department, our personnel department, they will go through and they will continue to search out for candidates that will help us reflect our student population much better. But to be very candid, that is extremely difficult when the pool is just so limited. And so for next year, we will be recruiting at 6 additional historically black colleges that we have not recruited from in the past. But when you take a look, the candidate pool for Hispanic, Black is not huge in our area. There's a limited number of individuals there. We will continue to do that, but we didn't write a specific action item towards that from the standpoint of we are limited based on certifications and civil service on the entrance pass into the district. We will continue to recruit, expand those efforts, but it's not specifically listed. The other piece, when we look at this from a district perspective, is we are going to put a first priority on inclusion and start our work there. We believe that we are better positioned with the social emotional learning standards and the other infrastructure in place to put together comprehensive initiatives to improve and make a difference in inclusion. And then we will build into our equity. If buildings think that they're in a different place and would like to start with more of an equity focus, they're welcome to do so. But we think that sense of belonging is something that we worked on for quite a while and that we can continue to leverage and accelerate much more quickly. So I wanted to take this opportunity again to thank all those individuals. When you add it up in totality, there's hundreds of hours spent here by individuals over those various committees, and thank them for their work. We've also wanted to make sure that the board was very clear, and there's been action since the resolution last June, and we continue to try to make a difference in this area, and we are making progress, and we think that we will start to see that even take more shape and more form over the 21-22 school year. So with that, I know Carl's on and perhaps Brian, and we'd be glad to answer any questions that you have, or if I fumbled it or beat it up too badly, if Carl or Brian will save me, that's appreciated.
Madam President?
Yes, Mr. Shriner.
Yes, thank you. I don't have any questions. I just, having served on a number of diversity and equity and inclusion committees over the last few years, I just want to say thank you. The appreciation that we have for this deep dive. It's obvious that a lot of work was done and it's greatly appreciated. So thank you to all of those folks, please.
And I just have to say, just being part of one of the committees, it's an honor and a privilege. And I just had one question, and I probably answered it in the last meeting, but I don't remember, and I apologize. As far as the continuous improvement plan, would that be incorporated with the site steering committees, or that's going to be separate?
Now, the site steering committee is actually the group that approves the continuous improvement plan for the building. So they're the ones that do the work to help development. So yes, the SSC is involved in the creation of their continuous improvement plan. So that's engagement again from parents, classified, certificated staff, and administrative staff on that as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Wise.